So I think surveys will always work. That gives you if you can say data to allow you to provide feedback, but not just from a survey perspective, but also giving time to really be as close to the market as possible.
Welcome to the All in Recruitment podcast by Manatal, where we explore best practices, learnings, and trends with leaders in the recruitment space. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube and Spotify to stay tuned for our weekly episodes. My name is Lydia, and joining us today is Caselyn Anne Gonzales, Head of Talent Acquisition at WTW. Welcome to the show, Caselyn, all the way from the Philippines.
Thank you, Lydia. It's a pleasure to be here, and hi, everyone.
So tell us about your background in talent acquisition and maybe a little bit about your current role at WTW, Caselyn.
Sure. So for me, I've been doing recruitment for more than 15 years now. I have experience supporting various industries from outsourcing, banking and finance, design engineering, and consulting. So I've led teams not just in the Philippines, but also Asia in the past. And now I'm currently the head of talent acquisition for WTW here in the Philippines.
So walk us through the meaning behind "pursue new" at WTW. I noticed it was very prominent on the website. So what does that mean?
Right. And actually, Pursue New was part of our, if you can say, old employer branding messaging for Willis Towers Watson. And you've noticed that we moved away and rebranded to WTW. So it's still part of our DNA, and the call to action of Pursue New is integrated to speaking to our current and future colleagues that we want to, if you can say, attract to the company. It's really designed to speak to the overall colleague experience and to highlight that we are an organization that would have an inclusive culture where colleagues can be their authentic selves when they come to work. That we are an organization that we do the right thing in both how we work in the companies that we support. That we are a culture that's committed to teamwork and community, and that we are a team of experts. And this is evident through our knowledge and experience. So when they, if you can say, pursue new and explore opportunities with us, these are, if you can say, the things that we want to highlight because these are what we do best. And this is what is unique about the company or the brand that we're part of.
And you mentioned something that's quite interesting, a term, a colleague experience, right? So how does that work for you?
Yeah. So for us, the colleague experience is really just when we did our survey and really highlighting our current strengths. And we want to keep these and nurture this, not just for the colleagues that's currently part of the organization, but also the incoming ones. They can be their authentic selves when they become part of the organization. We highlight that we have the highest level of integrity and we do the right thing, not just with the work, but also with the companies that we support. We are in a consulting firm that we're in. We support top companies in certain areas within their field. So we always do the right thing for them. We have a very collective and committed to teamwork and community that we support the current colleagues and also the clients that we have, and the expertise that we bring to the table. And like what I mentioned, we are a group of experts through our knowledge and experience. That's also our value add to them. So we want to make sure that when we speak to our colleagues, again, to our future and current ones, that these are some of the 4 critical elements that we instill and as mentioned, these are the current strengths that we have that we want to retain and nurture further as we go along.
And it's also interesting to know that, the candidates, it doesn't just stop at candidate experience, but you're also looking at them as having one foot in the door and already being seen as future colleagues or prospective employees, right? People who have already shown some kind of potential. So moving on to my next question, what is your approach towards talent acquisition today? You've been in the field for 15 years now. You would have seen major disruptions and uncertainties, and especially today, a competitive talent market, right? So what areas have you or did you prioritize in taking on this role?
Agree with you on that, Lydia. That's correct. Again, I've been here doing this for the last or more than 15 years now, and the last 2 years has been very disruptive. It's very
Mhm.
again, it's
Absolutely.
unprecedented of what we've been experiencing. But for me, and I think to answer your question, what are the areas that I prioritize since taking on the role? For me, I think there were four vital areas that I wanted to focus on. And the first one is really just ensuring that you have the right talent acquisition talent within the team that you're
Mm.
supporting. It's a combination of grit and the result orientation. It's very important that you have that same behavior skill set that if you can say that the TA team would have, because that should guarantee results. For me, it's very important that you have a very solid talent acquisition team to support you. Second is really activation of new sourcing channels and strengthening existing ones. So, meaning in our field, you cannot stop looking for new sourcing channels. There's always going to be a new way of attracting and getting talent. It can be a form of a new, if you can say, website. It can be a new applicant tracking system that
Mm.
can also post jobs. It can be a new software. So that would always change, and making sure that you activate what is, if you can say, new and exploring that as a solution. That was vital for me, and I think that will always be vital, regardless of the timeline that you're looking at. um, Third is really understanding the story of the organization and
Mm.
sharing your unique story in the conversations that you have to future candidates. So these are talking about critical touch points. And it's not just branding and what's written in the website, it's really educating as well your employees and even your team members to highlight the unique story about the organization and really emphasize that in all of the conversations that you have with the candidate. You need to make sure that you're speaking of the same thing, and that's also for me vital, to have that in place. And last but not the least is focusing on the candidate feedback.
Mm.
It's important for you to have a candidate-centric mindset, and for me, that was critical as well because that will help us remain competitive.
These sound like structural or foundational elements that you have to put in place, right? So going back to your first point, which is getting the right kind of talent to be in the talent team. So what did you look out for when you were structuring this to work towards your goals?
Um, to be honest, it's easy to get the right mix of experience.
Mm.
I'd always say that it can be assessed through a lot of conversation, but it's the behavioral aspect of it that I think leaders often miss, because at the end of the day, experience is one thing, but there's that type of behavior that needs to be in place for team members to have that level of, if you can say, result orientation mindset. We are in an industry or a field that it's not easy. It's an everyday grind that you have to do day in and day out. So
Mm.
having that similar behavior and having the right team in place, it can help you cross or navigate through very tough times or situations. And again, the last 2 years have proven that. So I think for me, it's very important that you have that right kind of mix because it can help you can say, overcome a lot of obstacles, even if you say in the next 2 to 3 years we still experience the same market struggle.
And what is the approach or what is the thinking around data? Because a few points that you mentioned earlier, which is the areas that you prioritize, right? One is the tools that you need, second being the
Yeah,
channels, and most of them are
correct.
digital today. And you're also looking at feedback, and many of these have data touch points. What is your approach towards data and using that to improve your processes?
I agree. And again, talent acquisition is very data driven. If you can see field, um, you know what's working for you from a sourcing channel perspective
Mm.
that's generating hires, but you also have to balance it from a, if you can say, a perspective of you also need to explore new sourcing channels. That's unprecedented because you need to come up of in terms of new ways to getting the right talent pool. So it's a combination of knowing your historical number but also exploring new ones. And I always say you just have to try it out. If it's a fail, then fail fast, right, and move on. from a candidate feedback perspective, it's also the same way. If we've been doing if you can say, the same process for the longest time, we would always have to stay close to it because candidates would always dictate where you should be heading. What they have, what they want, if you can say 2 years back, they may not be the same thing that they would yearn for this year on. So that's also consistently changing. And historical data points is important for you to have a basis or a baseline of what you can improve on or what you need to, if you can say, steer clear of. But it can also help you drive to explore new areas, not just new sourcing channel, but also ways of expediting and what matters to candidates. So I think it's always going to be a balance. You have to know your historical data. You need to know where you're getting the candidates and what they need. But you also have to have that level of foresight, knowing that they might require different things, and you would only know that not just based from the feedback that they will provide you, but also having a strong connection with what's happening externally to dictate what to do moving forward.
And as you said, things change exponentially, and the speed at which we're looking at changes and even new technologies coming into the pictures it's also to a certain extent unprecedented. So how do you stay up to date with all these things? How do you stay up to date with the technologies that are coming in and also the candidate expectations today?
Yeah, I think technology would play a big role to that, Lydia, which is both an advantage and can be a disadvantage depending on how you look at it. But at least nowadays, you have immediate feedback, not just from a survey perspective, but the tools that you have from an applicant tracking system down to job portals. It's an open market nowadays. You can always get that data from outside. But at least balancing that with always keeping up to date in terms of trend, that's also where you can, if you can leverage on external surveys, right? You can also leverage on external research that for us we do, and we also work with, for example, organizations to help us out. I think for now, getting information of what's available externally, plus again knowing what has worked in the past, provides you a balanced approach on how to navigate through either changes in the market, or how do you then attract the next candidates that you want for the organization.
And on that note, on technology and data, let's talk about tech talent then. Many companies have been forced to shift towards digitalization, as you noticed in the past 2 years, 2.5 years, even before that, I would say. In many of these companies have in essence become digital businesses, and just about every business today needs tech talent. So what would you say are some of the biggest challenges facing tech recruitment today, and how might leaders be viewing them in order to overcome these challenges?
I like to talk about this because this is one of the questions that I get to be asked all the time, because you're correct. I mean, and this is how I would always explain it. Globally, there is scarcity in the talent availability from a tech space. That is really just the reality. Meaning, all global organizations, we are looking for the same talent. We want to hire them yesterday, right? But in reality, we do not have enough pool to support this demand. That's really just the reality of it. So we're not producing enough supply that can support the expedited growth of organizations or companies. So that is also the main reason why the war on talent happened, and this predominantly happened in the tech space. So with that, what can we do? I mean, that is also the main reason why companies need to rethink the type of talent that they really need, balancing it based on availability, but also have a think about their training and learning curriculums internally. So meaning, if you know what you can attract in the market, what's available, if you have a training and learning curriculums internally that you can facilitate, well and good. But there are also options that they can explore. I mean, you can get an external company to help them augment some of the skill gap that they're noticing, right? Or really identify the skill that can be trained, skill that you need to really buy, and if there's a skill that needs to be outsourced. But these should be, if you can say, integrated as a plan of attack, because you cannot just go on really buying talent externally. All organizations need to take a step back, because, as mentioned, the reality is we do not have enough pool to support the demand globally.
So in terms of a small pool and looking at potential and growth within that pool, rather than just looking at a one size going to fit and going to, it's a complete or a perfect candidate, right? So what might be the priority when you look at a pool of candidates and then you're like, okay, this might be the best one right now, and this is a candidate that we absolutely need. So in terms of assessing that, what might be the the element or the factor that's topmost priority?
Yeah, I think you highlighted a very important point. It reads at assessing the need per organization, because our organization might change. An organization might prioritize, for example, automation in their field. Some organization might focus on digitalization as a second part. It would depend on their goals. But you mentioned that very well. You need to assess based on the org that you have. Let's put in as an example. If part of your goal in your organization is automation, and if you know that some of the automation, if you can say engineers, are very scarce, so you also have to take a step back and assess, okay, the what are the available talent in the market, and are these senior levels or junior levels, etc. If you're an organization that will have limited budget only, and you can only attract, for example, junior ones, fine. But you know that there's going to be a skill gap in place, and that will happen, right? That they cannot run a project on their own. So you have options that you can consider. Either do you get an external company that can help train the junior ones that you hired, or do you outsource that function in your organization and get, for example, a company that's expertise is doing that and help you launch that project? And then once that's done, then I mean, you can move on to the next goal for your organization. So I think it would always be a combination of both assessing what you need from an organization standpoint, balancing it with what's available in the market, plus augmenting it with the learning and if you could say training and learning curriculum that's available either internally within your organization, or asking another company to help you with that. But it has to be those both areas, and not just rely on purely buying talent externally, because it's not going to be sustainable for your organization as well.
That's interesting, because my next question was actually on talent strategies. How do you develop TA strategies that would be fulfilling, or that will fulfill the business needs of today and also in the foreseeable future? So, I think to a certain extent you've covered some of the ways or the strategies to think about that, how to fill in that skills gap and how to augment the candidates that the skills of the candidates that you already have. But are there any other tips on how to develop or how to think around TA strategies that would fulfill business needs in the future?
Right. I think I can answer it in a macro level, right? Yes, I think overall, the TA landscape will always change and will continue to evolve. That's going to be consistent. I share this for a while now, that this is a very aggressive field to be in, right? Recruiting. So for me, how I align what should be implemented at any given time is a combination of, based on my previous experience, current feedback from the business, and a high level of anticipation or foresight. So it has to be that combination, and I create strategies based on the scenario at hand. So at any given time, because the industry is very dynamic, combine those both, and it would, in terms of application, what should be implemented would be based on that timing. But I think what will remain to be consistent, regardless of what happens in the TA landscape, is the need to follow the candidate feedback, and have it act as your North Star. For me, that is something that I've done so many times, and based from experience, right? It worked. Because for me, I believe that the candidates will always be your number one customer, and they will also dictate the trend, what should change, and can also give you feedback what your team does best and even need to improve on. I always create strategies knowing that they are the priority, and that served me well ever since. And again, strategies can change. The demand, technologies can come and go, but what will remain consistent is the candidates would dictate what type of trend we would be heading and what would be the consideration that should be, if you could say, prioritized by organization. So you should follow that, and the strategies would come right after.
So moving into a slightly more deeper level, from the strategy level and looking at the different data points, right? So where would you go to find this kind of candidate comments or candidate feedback?
So I think surveys will always work. That gives you if you can say, data to allow you to provide feedback, but not just from a survey perspective, but also giving time to really be as close to the market as possible. As leaders, we tend to just look at numbers, look at the feedback from our internal businesses and even our teammates. But from time to time, you always have to look for what the market is if you could say, undergoing, what's important to them. And that means really having time to speak to them, having that focus group discussion, and really allowing them to give you the, if you could say, anecdotal feedback about your teams and what you're doing best and what can be improved. That should always be part of, if you can say, as part of your review, and not just looking at the data point every single time. Data points help. That is a critical part of the job. But hearing it from them firsthand, not just through surveys, but also from focus group discussions, can also help you navigate through that.
Out of sheer curiosity, in terms of in terms of survey, in terms of focus groups, these, this kind of valuable feedback, where would you likely get it from? What kind of candidate? Would it be a candidate that has not been successful, or would it be a candidate that has gone through and become successful and eventually become a colleague, into that experience? So where do you mine that information the best?
Of course, it's easy to say that you need to get that from the candidates who passed, but it's not. That shouldn't be the case. You need to get it from both candidates who are successful and became part of your organization, but also candidates who failed, regardless if they reached the initial stage or the final stages and unfortunately declined your offer. You need to get feedback from all of them, because it would again help you dictate and then have a sense of how that experience looks like and their top consideration. Being able to be as close to that as possible, regardless if they were successful or not, allows you to have a holistic view of your processes as well.
So moving on to diversity, D&I is critical today, as we're seeing, right? Even in Manatal, we've got more than 20 nationalities working with us. So what are some ways to think about implementing D&I processes or strategies in the hiring process?
Yeah. And I think for me, bottom line is representation is key, and your candidates should see that, and future candidates should see that. But also, before even thinking of how you can remove bias in your recruiting process per se, I think it's more important for organizations to ensure that they are tapping a wide net that allows all types of people to connect with your company or your brand and be free to apply and explore opportunities with you. As mentioned, a lot of companies would go to their recruitment process as the first step. But I think it's more imperative that you see and assess how your company or brand is speaking to potential candidates and casting a wider net to ensure that you're encouraging them to be part of your organization. At the very least, it's not about filtering and removing bias, but really more of how do you represent? How do you make sure that all areas are well represented and you are encouraging them to explore opportunities with you? I think that's more important rather than really creating additional steps to remove those. That's what I have observed in bigger organization, but I think that's the first area that you need to make sure of that your company is doing.
And how might this manifest itself in the process?
Right. So I think it's really reviewing how do you then, when you look at your brand, right, how does that impact, right? What's the tone of voice? Is this really attracting both, for example, both genders and all age groups, etc.? Number two is how wide your net is in reality, meaning is your brand able to reach to just a certain type of pool because that's what you want to attract, or is really speaking to a wide range that encourages them to apply to your organization and be curious about what you can offer? I think most of the time we're fixated with this is the type of profile that I need. How do I then speak to them so that they apply? But that's not the NI, right? That's not an inclusion. You have to think about how do I make sure that I'm speaking to all types of people, right? All sorts, and encouraging them to really explore opportunities with your brand. So I think that's how that should be the case and how it is positioned, rather than being focused in just one profile and thinking of ways to speak to them just directly.
And what might be the impact of generative AI tools in this respect, or even outside DNI? What might be the impact of generative AI tools and AI technologies within recruitment? We see that in many of the ATSs that we have now, and if you want a specific skill, it sort of picks them out without looking at, it eliminates to a certain extent unconscious bias. So, what might be the impact of generative AI tools and AI technologies in recruitment?
Right, great. And I think I can say that it certainly made everything more accessible to both candidates and the TA teams, because in reality, we use AI in everything that we do. From how the candidates get to be matched to a vacancy, right? How a prompt when a similar role gets to be posted, or how fast we screen and assess candidates. It's part of that. Even how we interact with hiring managers and understanding their requirements and matching it with candidates. So I think bottom line, aside from making it more accessible to everyone, it also opened the marketplace even more. So it also helped us from our I&D perspective in terms of our goals, but also making it accessible to a wide range of talent, plus making it easier for TA teams like ourselves. So it has a huge impact really for talent acquisition.
From the perspective of data, technologies have definitely propelled the use of data within talent acquisition and turned it into a more analytical and mathematical function in essence. So, Caselyn, what advice would you give someone starting out in talent acquisition today, given all the disruptions, given the fact that, as you said, change is the only constant, right? So it's the only consistent thing that you see, at least for now and into the next few years. So what advice would you give someone starting out in TA?
Wow. My advice, if you're someone who dislikes routine, who's passionate in making a difference to a life one hire at a time, or you strive in difficult situations, then this is the path for you. I think we can put it this way. It's a hard but fulfilling career. But the secret is to be resilient and always turn that no to a yes. It will take some practice, but you will get there. It's just possible. You just have to do the work. So if you're passionate to again making a difference to the world, then this is the right career path for you.
Thank you very much for your time and your insights today, Caselyn. I particularly like the focus on candidate expectations and looking at candidates even as future colleagues, as you have said, right? So thank you very much for your time and all these valuable insights. But drop us your contact details so that our audience can look for you.
Sure. Thank you for having me, Lydia. And again, for everyone, please do check us out. You can visit us careers.wtwco.com, and you can see all of the opportunities that we have there.
And we have been in conversation with Caselyn Anne Gonzales, the head of talent acquisition at WTW. Thank you for joining us this week. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channels to stay tuned for more weekly episodes from All in Recruitment.